Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
Welcome to another edition of the All Out Leadership Podcast, and we are wrapping up M for membership. Romans chapter 12, our key text, for as we have many members in one body, but all the members do not have the same function. So we, being many, are one body in Christ, individually members of one another, having then gifts differing according to the grace given us, let us use them. Ephesians 2:10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works." So we're created for contribution. God made us to be able to not only have gifts, but to use those gifts. I've once heard that the wealthiest place in the world is the graveyard, meaning the greatest riches, the greatest talents went to the grave, buried with them, never opened, never used, never given away to the world. Don't be that person. Don't go to the grave with your treasure, your talent still buried inside of you. Give it away. Truly, the greatest joy that we can have is when we're giving of ourselves, giving what God put inside of us to other people. You will always feel the most fulfilled when you're fulfilling what God created you to do. And what did he create you to do? He created you to be a contributor over being a consumer. Two people sit in church every single weekend, consumers and contributors. Which one are you? Two people on staff every single day that show up to work, a contributor or a consumer. Which one are you? There's those that give more than they take, and there's those that take more than they give. Which one are you? I always want to be able to give more than I ever take. I want to leave this world better than I found it. I want to leave every person I encounter better than when I found them. I want to leave this church better when I found it, this community. Why? Because I want to give more than I take. There's three areas we're called to contribute. You hear this quite a bit. It's not a cliche. It may sound like a cliche because you hear it a lot, but you hear it a lot because it's true. We're called to contribute our time, our talent, and our treasure. We're to live a surrendered life. And when you really look at your time, your talent, and your treasure, that is the essence of who you are. So the person who says, I'm living for God, I'm surrendered to God, but God doesn't have your time, and God doesn't have your talent, and God doesn't have your treasure, you really aren't surrendered to God. It's lip service, not life service. And so what does it mean to surrender your time? It just means God's in charge of your calendar. Because when God is in charge of your calendar, you will always have time to do what God said is most important for you to do. I meet people, man, I don't have time. Well, I say, congratulations, you're dead. And because only dead people don't have time. The truth is we all have time. We all have 24 hours a day. It's just some use their time more effectively than others. The second thing is talent. God has given you a talent. 1 Peter 4:10, as each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. Paul said you have a gift. Peter said you have a gift. So everybody has a gift. It might not be the same as a person on a platform. It might not be a visible gift. Actually, the greatest gifts to my body are my livers, my heart, my liver, singular, kidney, well, that's plural, kidneys, because those are the parts I don't see, but truthfully, I can't live without those. And in the body, the talents we can't see are often the most important. And so you might not be visible, but that doesn't make you less valuable. So just know you matter, and your talent and gift matters. Secondly, your treasure. What is that? That's your finances. Matthew 6:19, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust or the Federal Reserve or the corrupt United States government, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And so we're called to give our treasure. You truly know what somebody values by just looking at their checkbook, because your checkbook really just shows where your heart is. Now, here's something that's really good, because wherever you move your treasure, your heart's going to follow that. And the more you put your time and more you put your talent, or the more you put your finances into your local church, your heart's going to be in that local church. And when you put your heart into a team, your heart's going to be into that team. You can change your heart by changing where you put your treasure. And so people go, well, when my heart's there, I'll give. No, you give, then your heart will be there. And this is a really great principle, because the Bible tells us to love your enemies. How do you do that? Well, put your treasure into your enemy. Bless those that persecute you. Pray for those that spitefully use you. So when you're giving prayer and you're praying for them, all of a sudden your heart begins to change for them. Why? Because you started to put your treasure there. So great truth, great principle. You're struggling with somebody on the team. You're struggling with somebody in the church. Do something nice for them. Pray for them. Go out of your way to just make it a little investment into them. And all of a sudden you'll start to find they may not change, but your heart will change. And then as your heart changes, you'll probably find they end up changing too. All right, we wrap up membership. Look forward to seeing you next week as we continue with the next letter, E for equip.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at eriklawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.